I didn't begin this research trying to resurrect a civilization history insists never existed. That wasn't the goal. It started much more quietly by noticing inconsistencies. Small ones at first. Architectural details that didn't align with the stories we were taught. Industrial remnants that felt out of place in the timeline we were given. Photographs from the mid-1800s showing a level of sophistication that didn't match the narrative of a struggling, pre-industrial world. What unsettled me wasn't just what survived, but what didn't. The missing explanations. The blank spaces in the historical record where answers should have been. The silence. The more evidence I examined buildings, infrastructure, transport systems, archival images, the harder it became to reconcile physical reality with the official story of 19th century daily life. We're told most people live simply, that cities were chaotic, dirty, inefficient, that technology was primitive, communication slow, construction crude. But the material world left behind tells a very different story. So I stopped asking whether Tartaria existed. That question goes nowhere. Instead, I asked something far more revealing. If a civilization built these structures, what would everyday life inside it have actually looked like? This investigation isn't about fantasy or nostalgia. It's about logic, roads that are too perfectly graded to be accidental. Canals engineered with precision that modern systems still rely on. Buildings laid out with mathematical exactness, repeating patterns across continents as if guided by shared standards rather than isolated invention. What emerges isn't a picture of primitive survival, it's coordination. Not isolation, but connection. Not improvisation, but systems. Imagine daily life not as we've been taught to picture it, but as the evidence suggests. Cities designed to work with natural forces instead of against them. Infrastructure that anticipates movement, trade, ventilation, water flow. Architecture that reflects understanding of geometry, pressure, light, and environment knowledge embedded into stone and brick. If this sounds uncomfortable, it should. Because the moment you seriously ask how people lived inside these structures, the official narrative begins to collapse under its own weight. This series explores what daily life may have looked like in that forgotten world, not as myth, but as inference drawn from what still stands. How people woke, moved through cities, worked, traded, and lived within systems we no longer fully understand. And once you see those systems clearly, a more troubling question follows naturally. If this world functions so well, why don't we remember it? Once you stop dismissing Tartaria as a myth, the cities themselves become impossible to ignore. Across Europe, Asia, and North America, entire urban centers appear suddenly in the historical record fully formed. Wide boulevards, massive civic buildings, stone infrastructure that suggests long-term planning rather than rushed expansion. These weren't frontier towns growing organically over centuries. They were designed. What's striking isn't just their size, but their consistency. Similar architectural ratios, repeating layouts, identical engineering solutions appearing thousands of miles apart in cultures supposedly unconnected. This level of standardization implies shared knowledge and shared systems. We're told these cities were built rapidly by populations with limited technology. But the physical evidence argues otherwise. Foundations extend deeper than necessary for simple structures. Walls are thicker than required. Streets are graded with precision that even modern planners struggle to replicate without heavy why a city like this doesn't emerge from chaos. It emerges from order. And if cities are expressions of how people live, then these cities suggest a population accustomed to stability, coordination, and long-term thinking. Not survival, but continuity. That alone raises an uncomfortable question. Who exactly were these cities built for? If these cities weren't anomalies, then daily life within them must have followed rules we no longer recognize. Look at the infrastructure, extensive canal networks, integrated water systems, buildings positioned for airflow and light. These aren't decorative choices. They're functional. Someone understood how to design environments that reduced labor, improved health, and supported dense populations without modern utilities. This implies that daily routines work, Trade, movement were shaped by systems already in place. People didn't fight their environment. They moved with it. Transportation was smooth. Markets were centralized. Residential and civic spaces followed logical patterns. Even the scale of doors, windows, and staircases hints at standardized use, suggesting that people interacted with these spaces comfortably, not awkwardly. Life wasn't improvised. It was structured, and yet none of this aligns with the narrative of overcrowded slums and constant struggle we associate with pre-industrial life, which leads to another question. If life functioned this efficiently, why was this way of living abandoned? At some point, the record fractures. Photographs continue, but the tone changes. Cities still stand, but their purpose fades. Buildings are repurposed. Infrastructure is neglected or dismantled. Explanations become vague. This period, often described as a reset, marks a shift, not just in architecture, but in memory. Knowledge becomes fragmented. Systems that once worked seamlessly are labeled obsolete or misunderstood. What's unsettling is how quickly this happens. Within a few generations, the origin and function of massive structures are forgotten. Official histories offer simplified explanations that don't match the evidence. It's not that people suddenly became incapable, it's that continuity was broken. Daily life after the reset looks smaller, narrower, more constrained. Cities that once served a greater system are reduced to shells of their former purpose. And history moves on without looking back. Civilizations don't forget by accident. Knowledge disappears when it's no longer useful or no longer allowed, whether through catastrophe, control, or convenience. Certain ways of living were replaced with simpler narratives. Teaching people that the past was chaotic justifies the present. Erasing evidence of a highly functional world removes uncomfortable comparisons. If people once lived better, more efficiently, more harmoniously with their environment, then decline must be explained. So instead, the past is framed as primitive. The structures are admired, but not understood. Their builders are credited, but never truly studied. What remains is a version of history that explains survival, but not success. And that may be the most revealing omission of all. This series isn't about claiming certainty. It's about recognizing patterns. When architecture, infrastructure, and geography tell the same story across continents, it deserves attention. When daily life implied by physical evidence contradicts written history, the contradiction matters. Life in Tartaria before the reset may not have been perfect, but it appears to have been coherent, organized, intentional, remembering. That doesn't mean rejecting modern life, it means questioning why knowledge was lost instead of built upon, perhaps. The greatest mystery isn't what that world was. It's why we stopped asking how it worked. And once you ask that question, you can't unsee the silence surrounding the answer.